Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. ID now.
This is my car.
What specific suspicion do you have right now, officer?
We got a report. Just stay right there.
I am complying, but I want the record to reflect that I have done nothing unlawful.
It was a scorching Thursday afternoon in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. The sun beat down relentlessly, bouncing off the polished metal of luxury cars lined up in the Riverwalk Mall parking lot. Heat waves shimmered over asphalt, mixing with the faint scent of exhaust and the aroma of coffee from a nearby cart. On the surface, it looked like any ordinary day. People coming and going, children laughing, the occasional rumble of traffic. But in the center of the lot, tension was quietly building. A black sedan gleamed in the sunlight as a well-dressed woman carefully placed shopping bags into the trunk. Her light blazer and silk blouse gave her a professional air, and the deliberate way she moved suggested composure and purpose. That calm moment shattered when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. ID now." The woman turned slowly. Standing behind her was a young officer in uniform, hand hovering near his sidearm, eyes narrow and calculating. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely, but every word carried the quiet authority of someone used to commanding a room. "There's a suspicious person reported in this area. Step back and show me your ID." The officer responded, tone firm, clipped, and rehearsed. She raised a brow, noticing a second patrol car quietly arriving, lights flashing silently. "I am loading my own car with my own purchases. Can you tell me what suspicious behavior I've displayed?" The officer hesitated, his jaw tightening. He knew the description from dispatch matched her loosely. A woman near an expensive car. But there was nothing overtly suspicious in her actions. Still, he repeated the demand, and the tension in the parking lot thickened. Shoppers paused, whispered to one another, some filming with their phones. The woman remained calm. Slowly, she retrieved her wallet from her bag. Inside were her driver's license, professional credentials, and a small card embossed with the emblem of the South Carolina Supreme Court. She held them up, visible, yet her gaze never wavered from the officer. "You see, officer, everything I'm doing is lawful. I have two options. Comply under protest or assert my rights," she said evenly. Her tone was calm, deliberate, and measured. The officer's fingers tightened around his radio. His training told him to act decisively when there was a report of a suspicious person. His instincts told him this stop was necessary. Yet here she stood, composed, fully cooperative, and clearly armed with identification that should have ended the encounter immediately. Still, he called for backup. Within moments, the quiet tension erupted into a crowd. 2 more patrol cars arrived, lights flashing. Shoppers slowed their pace, watching. Phones emerged, capturing video of what looked increasingly like an overreach. The ordinary act of parking a car had transformed into a spectacle. The woman, Justice Angela Reed, kept her hands visible, placing the final shopping bag in the trunk. "Officer, here is my driver's license and my Supreme Court ID. You may verify them immediately," she said. Her voice carried calm authority, the kind that comes from decades of experience in the courtroom. The officer looked at the credentials, flickering doubt in his eyes. But pride and ego pushed him onward. "Step aside while I call for backup," he barked, motioning with his hand. His grip on control tightened. Reed, unflinching, complied with measured steps, aware that her every move was being recorded, every gesture scrutinized. The crowd grew as whispers spread, some curious, some appalled. Phones captured every angle, amplifying the tension. This was not just a simple stop. This was a collision of 2 worlds. Reed, 54 years old, had spent her life pursuing justice, advocating for fairness, and holding authority accountable. Born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina, She had seen systemic inequities firsthand. Her career, graduating from Howard University, clerking for prominent judges, taking on civil rights cases, was built on navigating complex power structures and confronting injustice with intellect and strategy. The officer, Kevin Marshall, was 28 years old with 6 years on the force. Ambitious, eager, yet inexperienced in nuanced social interactions, his approach was shaped by procedure and instinct, not discernment. His record included complaints of heavy-handed stops, some citing racial profiling. Supervisors noted his strict adherence to protocol, but flagged his tendency to escalate rather than de-escalate tense encounters. In this parking lot, those tendencies would collide disastrously with Reed's composed authority. "Please remain calm and step aside for verification," Marshall said, trying to maintain control as his anxiety flickered beneath the surface. Reed's hands remained visible. Movements slow, deliberate, unhurried. Every action was a statement of her rights and awareness. The crowd's whispers grew louder, now audible, carrying disbelief at the officer's insistence. Phones continued to record. The power of the public eye began pressing on the officer, making him hyper-aware of scrutiny he hadn't anticipated. "Officer," Reed spoke quietly but clearly, "I am fully complying. But I want to state for the record that this stop is without reasonable suspicion and lacks legal basis." Marshall's fingers brushed the edge of the car, tight on control. His voice wavered slightly. He was trapped. Pride, procedure, and bias were driving him deeper into an unnecessary confrontation. Reed's calm precision highlighted his overreach, making him increasingly defensive. The scene escalated further when he motioned for her to turn around. The metal cuffs clicked against her wrists as she obeyed. Her eyes stayed level with his, scanning the crowd, noting every witness, every phone recording. Her posture was unbroken, regal. Inside her mind, Reed was already calculating the next steps. Every detail, every word, every movement would be critical evidence. She considered the legal channels, documentation, and witnesses. Meanwhile, Marshall wrestled with the tension between justification and dawning realization that he might be in the wrong. "Where are you watching from right now?" Reed's calm presence could almost speak to the audience through the camera lens. If you value knowing your rights and seeing justice in action, please hit subscribe. It's important for more people to understand what can happen and how to respond safely and correctly. The crowd remained frozen, phones in hand. The ordinary act of parking a car had become a public standoff, a live demonstration of how bias, ego, and misjudgment can spiral out of control. Reed's calm professionalism stood in stark contrast to Marshall's defensive overreaction. The backup officers arrived, scanning the scene but unsure how to intervene. Reed, ever deliberate, displayed her Supreme Court ID for visibility, ensuring all were aware of her position and authority. She spoke only when necessary, her voice measured, deliberate, cutting through the chaos without raising volume unnecessarily. Every observer in the lot felt the weight of what was unfolding. The intensity of the moment was compounded by the absurdity. A highly respected state Supreme Court justice detained for doing nothing wrong. Phones recorded, whispers grew, and a small crowd began to form. The air was thick with tension, disbelief, and the silent acknowledgement that something deeply wrong was happening. Marshall's internal conflict deepened. Hesitation mixed with stubbornness, with ego pressing him to maintain authority despite the growing evidence of error. Reed's eyes, calm and unwavering, held his attention. Her composure amplified his uncertainty. He realized, too late, that procedural adherence without discernment could lead to consequences far beyond the parking lot. The stage was set for confrontation, and yet Reed's patience ensured the first chapter of this standoff ended without escalation into violence. Every choice she made, every word spoken, set up the inevitable unraveling of the officer's assumptions in the chapters to come. The afternoon sun continued to bake the parking lot, making the flashing lights of the patrol cars look almost surreal against the polished black of Justice Reed's sedan. Shoppers circled the edges of the scene, their whispers carrying like a low hum through the lot. Phones lifted and lowered, capturing angles from every direction. The ordinary act of loading groceries had escalated into a full spectacle, a public standoff between a Supreme Court justice and a young officer clinging to authority. Officer Kevin Marshall stood stiffly near Reed, his radio crackling intermittently. His backup had arrived, but they hung back, unsure whether to intervene. The crowd had grown now, curious onlookers, parents holding children, teenagers filming, all witnessing a confrontation that seemed increasingly absurd. Every person there was a potential witness, every phone a record of his actions. Marshall could feel the pressure, the heat not only from the sun, but from the situation spiraling beyond his control. Reed's hands remained visible, her posture impeccable. Her face was calm, composed, every inch of her demeanor radiating authority. The cuffs on her wrists felt heavy, but she barely reacted. She understood the dynamics at play. Every gesture was evidence, every word carefully weighed. Her mind catalogued every detail: the approaching crowd, the whispers, the flash of cameras, the tightness of Marshall's jaw. She was fully aware that this moment was about more than her. It was a public demonstration of how authority, unchecked, could overstep boundaries. "Step over here," Marshall ordered, motioning toward the side of the patrol car. His voice carried strain now, the firmness giving way to tension. "I am complying under protest," Reed replied, her voice steady. "But I want to make it clear that this stop is without reasonable suspicion. I am asking for documentation of all actions taken." Marshall's hand hovered over his radio again. He wanted to assert control, to maintain the illusion that he was acting correctly. But doubt was creeping in. He glanced at the crowd, then at his colleagues, and noticed subtle shifts. Hesitation, raised eyebrows, hands hovering near cameras. He knew this stop would be scrutinized, but pride and ego drove him to continue. One of the backup officers, a middle-aged woman with years on the force, leaned in slightly. "Do we know who she is?" she asked quietly. Marshall's response was almost automatic. "Just a suspicious person fitting the description we were given. That's all we know." Reed's lips pressed into a thin line. The calm facade she projected masked a flurry of calculations. Every officer around her was a variable, every action a potential complication. She had faced public scrutiny before, but rarely with physical constraint and so many witnesses. Her legal training informed every move. Assert rights, remain calm, document, and wait for verification. "Officer, please verify my identification immediately," she said, holding her Supreme Court credentials clearly in front of him. "I am fully authorized to be here, and every action I take is lawful. There is no reason for escalation." Marshall glanced down at the ID. Recognition flickered, but it was fleeting. His training emphasized caution. He hesitated to fully accept what he saw. He felt the weight of authority pressing on him, the need to appear in control, to follow procedure, even when reality challenged his assumptions. "Back up. Ensure she stays here while we confirm the details," he called out, voice firm but betraying tension. The flashing lights of the patrol cars reflected across the hood of her sedan, painting a chaotic canvas of authority, suspicion, and public scrutiny. The crowd shifted, murmuring. Phones raised, recording the unfolding scene. Reed's calm presence drew attention. Bystanders began noticing the imbalance of power, the absurdity of detaining a black woman who had done nothing wrong. The whispers turned to audible questions. "Why are they doing this? She's just parking her car." The intensity of observation added weight to every decision Marshall made, creating a pressure that neither protocol nor ego could fully manage. Reed's gaze met his. It was a silent exchange, a moment of confrontation without violence. Her eyes communicated resolve, experience, and quiet authority. Marshall, meanwhile, felt the unspoken challenge: admit error or escalate further. He chose the latter, unable to step back, unwilling to show hesitation. Hands visible. He barked again, stepping closer. Step here now for verification. I am complying, officer, Reed said, slowly moving. But I request that all steps be documented. You are detaining me without cause. A teenage boy perched on the curb raised his phone higher, capturing the audio and video. A woman nearby whispered to a friend, "Is she a judge?" Reed ignored the comment, maintaining her focus on the situation. Every sound, every movement, every flicker of doubt in Marshall's expression became part of the unfolding narrative. Marshall's internal tension mounted. Doubt crept in, but ego and fear of appearing weak pushed him onward. The crowd, though silent in comparison to his commands, exerted pressure. Their presence reminded him that this was no longer a routine stop. Public perception mattered, and already he was losing control of it. Finally, Marshall motioned for her to turn around. The metal cuffs clicked against her wrists. The sound reverberated unnaturally in the quiet of the lot. Reed's posture did not change. Her composure remained intact, but inside, her mind raced, calculating next steps, documenting violations, preparing to escalate through legal channels. Where are you watching from right now? Reed might as well have spoken directly to the audience capturing the scene. If you value knowing your rights, please subscribe. This matters. Everyone should understand what can happen and how to respond safely and correctly. The crowd had grown. Shoppers paused, phones out, observing the surreal scene. Children held their parents' hands tightly, sensing the tension. A middle-aged man leaned on his car, filming, murmuring, "I can't believe this is happening over parking." Inside the patrol car, the air was thick with tension. Reed's hands were cuffed, but her mind was unrestrained. She considered the Fourth Amendment, the rights she held under state law, and every step she would take to ensure accountability. Marshall, in contrast, wrestled with the first flickers of self-doubt. His fingers twitched on the wheel, knuckles white. Every passing second revealed the growing gravity of his error. Reed's calm, deliberate silence contrasted sharply with his agitation. She remained aware of the cameras, the witnesses, and the legal implications. Every breath, every gesture was evidence of her composure against an officer's excessive force and implicit bias. The ride to the station felt interminable. Traffic hummed faintly around them. Radios crackled, and the distant sounds of the city seemed muted against the oppressive tension inside the car. Marshall's justification wavered. Each passing minute added to the mounting weight of his mistake, while Reed prepared mentally to assert accountability as soon as they arrived. At the station, the holding room smelled faintly of disinfectant and vinyl. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, adding to the sterile atmosphere. Reed sat, cuffed, and laid her Supreme Court credentials on the counter. Her eyes scanned the room, analyzing every detail, every officer, every protocol that could be leveraged in her defense. Lieutenant Sandra Whittaker approached, seasoned and deliberate. "Who do these belong to?" she asked quietly, authority in her tone. "I am Justice Angela Reed, a member of the South Carolina Supreme Court," she replied. "All identification is valid and verifiable." Whittaker's expression shifted from curiosity to recognition. Marshall's face drained color. The gravity of the situation hit him. He had detained one of the state's highest authorities, allowing bias and assumption to override reason. Reed remained calm, deliberate, and authoritative. She requested documentation of the stop, body camera footage, dash cam recordings, and officer statements. Every detail mattered. Marshall's panic grew as he realized the magnitude of his error. The incident, though physically minor, had escalated into a public, legal, and ethical crisis. Reed's calm authority contrasted with Marshall's defensive posture, highlighting the absurdity of the situation. Outside, the public had witnessed every step. Inside, accountability was about to be enforced. Inside the Charleston Police Department holding room, the fluorescent lights hummed a steady, oppressive rhythm. Justice Angela Reed sat with her hands cuffed on the metal table in front of her, her Supreme Court credentials carefully displayed. Her posture was unyielding, her eyes alert, taking in every officer, every movement, every detail. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old vinyl, a sterile backdrop to the high-stakes drama unfolding. Officer Kevin Marshall stood nearby, rigid, face pale. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him like a physical force. He had detained a sitting state Supreme Court justice, an authority far above his own, and allowed implicit bias to guide his judgment. His mind raced, trying to justify every decision. But each explanation felt thinner and weaker as the minutes ticked by. Lieutenant Sandra Whittaker, seasoned and calm, stepped forward, her expression neutral but firm. "Officer Marshall," she began, her voice carrying authority, "you understand the severity of this, don't you?" Marshall swallowed, struggling for words. I was following protocol," he managed, though the conviction sounded hollow even to himself. Following protocol does not excuse unlawful detention," Whittaker interrupted. She gestured toward Reed's Supreme Court ID. "You detained a sitting justice without cause, without reasonable suspicion, and without verification. Do you understand that?" Marshall's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to assert that the call from dispatch justified his actions, but he could feel the absurdity pressing in. Every witness in the parking lot, every recording, every whisper from bystanders now reflected the reality of his error. His ego and authority offered no shield here. Reed remained calm, her tone steady when she finally spoke. "This is not only about me," she said. "It is about accountability, about ensuring that lawful authority is respected and that citizens are protected from unlawful stops. Every action you take as an officer has consequences. Every decision to escalate without cause must be documented and justified." The room was silent for a moment. Whittaker nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in Reed's words. She picked up the phone and dialed the court's main line, confirming Reed's credentials. Within minutes, the verification came through. Reed's identity and authority were beyond question. Marshall's face drained of color. The realization hit him fully. He had acted on bias, assumption, and ego, detaining someone whose position demanded respect and whose legal authority was unassailable. The gravity of the situation stretched across every second in the room. Whittaker turned to him sharply. "Officer, you are being placed on administrative leave pending a full review. This will include all reports, all camera footage, and every statement taken from today. Do you understand?" He nodded silently, unable to speak. The shame and panic coiled tightly in his chest. The consequences of the stop would extend far beyond his personal record. They would ripple across the department, the community, and the public eye. Reed leaned forward slightly, placing her hands on the table. "I want full documentation of every aspect of this incident. Dispatch records, body camera footage, dash cam recordings, officer statements. Everything. I will review it, and I will pursue the legal avenues necessary to ensure accountability." Her voice was firm, deliberate, and methodical, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Marshall glanced at her, a flicker of fear crossing his features. Reed's calm authority contrasted sharply with his panic. She had anticipated this. Her legal mind was already 3 steps ahead, mapping every potential loophole, every misstep, and every method of rectifying the injustice. Over the next hour, officers began processing the error. Cuffs were removed, identification was returned, and Reed's dignity remained intact. She stood slowly, her composure unbroken, surveying the room as if measuring the effectiveness of each corrective action. Her presence demanded respect, and it was clear even to Marshall that his actions had been reckless. Whittaker placed a hand briefly on Reed's shoulder. "We're correcting the mistake. I assure you, this will be reviewed thoroughly," she said. Her tone was professional, yet there was a quiet acknowledgement of the significance of the incident. Reed nodded, her expression controlled. "This correction is necessary, but it does not absolve the initial misconduct. I will pursue the appropriate legal remedies. Every action here will be documented, and accountability must follow." Immediately after leaving the holding room, Reed's work continued. She contacted her legal team, colleagues familiar with civil rights litigation, and organizations dedicated to police accountability. Each phone call was deliberate, every instruction precise. She was organizing the evidence, from phone recordings to body camera footage, to ensure nothing could be dismissed or overlooked. Within hours, the initial complaint was filed. Every detail was included: the vague call to dispatch, the initial approach, the request for identification, the backup arrival, and the growing crowd of witnesses recording the incident. Each piece of video evidence, from bystanders' phones to dash cam footage, reinforced the unlawful nature of the stop. Public reaction was swift. Social media exploded with clips of the confrontation. Outrage and disbelief poured in, comments expressing solidarity and condemnation. Legal analysts dissected the situation, highlighting clear violations of constitutional and state protections. Mainstream media picked up the story, emphasizing the irony of a Supreme Court justice being detained while performing a simple, lawful act. Inside the department, an internal investigation began immediately. Lieutenant Whittaker and senior officers reviewed every piece of evidence. Their findings were damning. The officers' actions were inconsistent with protocol, unsupported by reasonable suspicion, and influenced by bias. Recommendations included disciplinary measures, retraining, and systemic review to prevent future misconduct. Marshall was officially placed on administrative leave pending a formal hearing. Reed's legal team emphasized reform over personal gain. Policy changes, mandatory bias training, and enhanced oversight mechanisms were pursued. The city faced public pressure to address systemic failures, understanding that the case represented not just a personal injustice, but a broader societal issue. As the dust settled, the impact of the incident became clear. Training protocols were updated, officers were educated on constitutional rights and implicit bias, and transparency measures were strengthened. Reed's case became a reference point for reform and accountability. It showed that even those with authority are not immune to unlawful treatment, but also that diligence, preparation, and calm authority can turn a moment of injustice into systemic change. From a legal perspective, the case underscored protections guaranteed under the Fourth Amendment. Detaining someone without reasonable suspicion is unconstitutional. State laws reinforced that officers must have clear evidence before stopping or searching a person. Violations of these laws can lead to civil litigation, as Reed's team demonstrated with meticulous documentation. The incident also highlighted the effects of implicit bias. Assumptions about race, appearance, and context led to an unnecessary and unlawful escalation. Recognizing such bias requires training, reflection, and systemic safeguards, all of which became central to the reforms prompted by Reed's detention. For the public, the lessons were clear. Maintain calm, document interactions, keep hands visible, assert rights respectfully, and gather evidence if confronted in a similar scenario. Knowledge of legal protections is essential to ensure that misconduct can be challenged effectively. Reed's experience demonstrated that accountability is not passive. Systems that allow discretion without oversight risk perpetuating injustice. Policy reform, mandatory training, transparency, and community engagement are essential to prevent similar incidents. In the end, Justice Reed's day at the Riverwalk Mall was more than a simple misunderstanding. It became a case study in authority, bias, and the power of preparation. It reminded the public that every citizen has rights, every officer has responsibilities, and every institution must be held accountable. Through patience, meticulous planning, and unwavering composure, Reed transformed a humiliating, unlawful detention into a catalyst for meaningful reform and public awareness. Her calm authority, her insistence on accountability, and her commitment to systemic change ensured that the incident would be remembered not as a personal defeat, but as a victory for justice. Officer Marshall's errors were recorded, analyzed, and addressed. Policies changed. The public watched. Lessons were learned. This was not just a story about a single unlawful detention. It was a lesson in courage, preparation, and the importance of standing firm in the face of bias. It was proof that even when authority missteps, calm reason, legal knowledge, and patience can turn injustice into change.